Before I talk about Taiwan, I want to say a few words about Gonzalo Lira. Somehow there are still people believe that Gonzalo is some kind of a Ukrainian SBU asset. And there's even rumor he's not really dead, etc. I mean, his death was announced by both his father and the US State Department. So I don't know what more can we prove that he passed away. I wish he was still alive. Um, I don't know what the purpose and what's the motivation for these people, but I just want to say I don't see any evidence whatsoever. And to me, it doesn't make any sense. What can SBU get out of him if he were an SBU asset? What can they get out of it? I don't see the point. I don't see the logic here. Now, I want to make it clear that my interaction with Gonzalo was limited. I interviewed him, and before that, during that time, I participated in his weekend, like a Saturday morning, 11 o'clock. He had some chats with some of his fans. Okay, so we had the few those sessions. I didn't even participate all of them, but I participated a few. And it's always kind of like a very relaxed chat, just about any topic. He used to be a life coach, right? And so some people talk to him, ask his questions about that. My main interest is in the geopolitics. So I only talk about geopolitics with him a few times. And then I interviewed him. So that's my interaction with him. So I can't really say I know him that well. But one thing is very clear to me that he is a person that always to his best ability to tell the truth. And for that reason, I respect him. Okay. And I hope those people who has been spreading rumors about him, one day will have the courage to realize they're wrong, and they should apologize to him and his family. Okay, let's talk about the Taiwan election. First, let's have a look at the result. Now, there are three candidates. One is the color green is for the ruling party, the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party. And then the middle one, the blue color is for the Kuomintang, KMT. And so the third one is the National People's Party, NPP. And as you can see here, the ruling party, the DPP, won with around 40%, and the two others add together probably more than around 60%. And so to say that the ruling party really won is true. They have the most votes, so they won, but they didn't have the majority. Okay. Now, some Western narrative is that this is the pro-independent party, which is true. This is the DPP really want to have an independent Taiwan. And so this is somehow because the DPP wins, that means that people in Taiwan want independence. Well, but if you look at closely the number, they only got 40% of the vote. The reason they win is because the other parties are doing worse, not because they are doing really that great. And considering the voting rate is around 70%, that means the people in Taiwan who are eligible to vote, 28% of people eventually voted for the DPP, right? 30% of people who didn't vote means they don't care, right? This means that. And actually, many of them do not care. I talked to some of my audience because they said if whoever wins, they don't think there's any difference. And they're right. Using the Western logic, that DPP is a pro-independence and only less than 30% of people would want to have independent Taiwan. And let's not forget some of the people who voted for DPP, they themselves not necessarily voted for DPP for independence. Some of them simply cannot bring themselves to vote for KPT or the third party, the NPP. Okay. There's always those kind of voters. Anyway, so this is the result. And then in terms of the parliament seat, the DPP actually has fewer than the KPT. So which is making very unclear who's going to be the speaker. And they need some kind of a backdoor negotiations and trade-offs and stuff like that to determine who, where the third party will become important, right, in order to get a speaker. But anyway, this is the result. The mainstream Western media claimed two things. Before the election, they claim, okay, this is the most important election. It's going to determine whether the Taiwan Strait will have peace. And then after the election, they claim, okay, China lost because the China-backed KMT lost. I think none of them is accurate. This election, just like any other election in Taiwan, doesn't mean anything in terms of Taiwan's future. Taiwan doesn't have the ability to determine its own future. That's very clear. The Taiwan's future, Taiwan problem, can only be solved between the United States and China. The other thing is in terms of China-backed KMT. It is true in the past the Chinese government wanted to see KMT candidate win in different elections because KMT came from mainland, and the party's funder, Sun Zhongshan, which the Western call him Sun Yixian, who is also the funder of modern-day China. And that is the agreement that mainland has with the KMT. That's something they have in common, all right? But recently there is a shift. The Chinese government realized that whoever is in charge, Taiwan will always be the US puppet. And whoever is in charge in the US, they will continue to use Taiwan as a leverage against China. Since unification is in the Chinese constitution, the way to solve the Taiwan issue is China continues to be stronger economically, militarily, and be more forceful diplomatically. Whoever wins the election in the US, that's what China believes it's need to continue to do. And Taiwan's election is simply a sideshow. That has been the recent consensus in the Chinese leadership and Chinese government. So to say, okay, China is so disappointed, the KMT lost, that simply is not true. In fact, I would say a majority of the netizens actually want to see DPP wins because people actually are very tired of this situation is not getting resolved. They actually want to see some DPP really declare independence and then force the Chinese leader to take actions to solve this issue once for all. Actually, that's the sentiment for a lot of the netizens that I saw the comments. As I mentioned, that there has been a lot of false and inaccuracies in the Western mainstream media when they're reporting about Taiwan, about China. And this time about the election, there's no exception. And let's have a look at one article that particularly stand out for me. The article got my attention both by its title and by its author. The title is Taiwan's Status Quo Election. Why the result won't have much effect on cross-strait relations or US-Chinese tensions. I would say I agree with that assessment for this election. Whoever wins, it's going to be a status quo. I agree with that assessment. And it's written by David Sachs, whom I listened to him in the past a little bit, and I got the idea this is a reasonable person. Okay, so that's why I find this is interesting. That's why I read this article from the Foreign Affairs, as you can see. But after I read it, I have to say there are just so many inaccuracies. There's errors, there's the distortions. It's both disappointing and surprising to me. Like I said, I thought David Sachs is a reasonable person. Let me just point it out a few very obvious ones. Okay, let's start with this 92 consensus. Now, here there's a paragraph. It says, at first glance, Ho's position, Ho is the KMT candidate. Ho's position on cross-strait issues seems like a throwback to the Ma era. Ma is Ma Ying-jeou, who was the president in 2008 until 2016. Okay. He has endorsed Ma, meaning Ma has endorsed the 1992 consensus, which the KMT defines as an agreement between Taipei and Beijing, that there is one China with each side holding in different interpretation as to which government is its rightful representative. Now, so far, he's correct. But then, for the KMT, it's the Republic of China, not the People's Republic of China. China, by contrast, interprets the 1992 consensus as meaning that there is only one China, that Taiwan is part of it, and that the People's Republic of China is the sole legal government of China. Despite this disagreement on the meaning of 1992 consensus, it has nevertheless provided the political foundation for over 24 agreements negotiated between Taiwan and China during Ma's presidency. You see, this particular sentence, despite this disagreement on the meaning of 1992 consensus, that is simply not accurate. You see, the disagreement is the interpretation of the one China. The consensus here is there is only one China. See, he's trying to confuse you, right? What the 1992 consensus says is there is just one China. And we agree on that. Both sides agree. The Republic of China believe Republic of China is that one China, and the People's Republic of China is that one China, but there is just one China. We have our own interpretation what that one China refers to. This one China covers both the Taiwan and the mainland. That's what the consensus is. But he makes it sound like there is a disagreement of 1992 consensus itself. That is simply not true. He actually was correct in the beginning. An agreement between Taipei and Beijing that there is one China, which each side holds a different interpretation as to which government is its rightful representative. That is 1992 consensus. There is no disagreement of its meaning. The meaning is there's one China. But I don't know, the follow-up, why does he write such a way that is very confusing? Now, the second problem this article has is that he's trying to tell people that the people in Taiwan want to be close to the West because of all these things, the values and stuff like that. And he used some of the examples, and both examples are very problematic. The second problem he has, this article has, is that several places he is not explaining. He gives people the impression that people in Taiwan wants to have very good relationship with the West. And here is one spot he's saying, to be sure, political debates in Taiwan remain fierce. Only 3 years ago, lawmakers hurled pig intestines at their colleagues to protest Tsai's decision to open Taiwan's market to U.S. pork. But Taiwan's voters' choice of one candidate or another is very unlikely to alter Taiwan's basic approach to foreign policy. The real threat to Taiwan instead lies in what Xi does after the polls close and in the outcome of another vote, the November presidential election in the United States. You see, he very lightly mentioned this pork issue. This is actually a pretty important incident that people need to know. He didn't tell you the backstory. The U.S. is one of the few countries that doesn't ban ractopamine, which is a hormone that's being used to make pork and beef grow lean meat. Most country, vast majority of the country in the world ban that hormone because it causes heartbeat increase and some other problems. Most country, vast majority of the country have banned the pork that has ractopamine, and that including all the European countries. In fact, the U.S. exported pork to China does not have a ractopamine because it's banned in China. But here you can see the U.S. actually forced Taiwan to take in the U.S. pork that has ractopamine, that potentially has a health hazard to its people. And the Taiwan government caved to the United States, right? So instead of saying that here is something that U.S. has been bullied Taiwan to take in its own pork that it cannot even export to mainland China, and they forced Taiwan to take that. What it says is, it's not a big deal. So you see, the people in Taiwan wants to be close to the West, to the United States, right? So this is one spot. There's another spot he mentioned Taiwan and Japan have also become closer. This trend may provide a critical for Taiwan because if a military conflict with China were to erupt, Japanese contributions to an allied operation could prove decisive. Tokyo has already helped Taipei absorb the blow of the Chinese economic sanctions and supplied Taiwan with millions of doses of COVID-19 vaccines. Here is a blatant lie. China never sanctioned Taiwan in terms of the vaccines. The Taiwan government refused to take any vaccines coming from China. In fact, they actually stopped buying Pfizer's vaccines because the Pfizer's vaccines selling headquarters in Asia is in Shanghai. So all the Pfizer vaccines have to go through Shanghai, all right, the purchase of that. And for that reason, actually, Taiwan refused to buy anything from Pfizer. That was what happened. The vaccines that Tokyo gave to Taiwan are AstraZeneca vaccines that had problems. If you remember that, they had the problems. They have to stop. And Tokyo stopped using, but they already bought the AstraZeneca's, the problematic vaccines. And those vaccines were going to expire soon. So they gave those to Taiwan. The vaccines they themselves stopped using. And that's what they gave to Taiwan. And that was also another controversial issue. David Sachs used that as a sign that somehow Tokyo is helping Taiwan. And in this article, it's also declared that Taiwan is some kind of a vibrant democracy with freedom of speech. I can tell you right away, a country does not have an independence. There is no such a thing as democracy. Okay, democracy means people decide. As you can see from previous examples, the Taiwan government caves to the US demand, to Japanese demand, or show of friendship, forced, very much forced, right? Because they wanted to please all the Western countries at the cost of their own health. You cannot call that a democracy. And the other thing is the freedom of speech. It's not that long ago, the Taiwan government actually canceled the license for a very popular TV station, Zhongtian, because Zhongtian is deemed as being too friendly to mainland. It's not like anything that particularly troubling in terms of the reporting that is untrue or they're spreading rumors. It's not because of any of those. It's because their crime, the so-called crime, is they are too close to mainland. And I personally don't think they're that close to mainland, and they certainly doesn't have direct contact with anybody in mainland. They just report things as they are. One of the few very impartial and objective channels. Very popular, but they got their license being revoked by the Taiwan government. So, I mean, all these things that David Sachs doesn't tell you, right? In this article, he doesn't tell you. He just claims that this is a vibrant democracy and has freedom of speech, and you should just take his words. And I have to say, democracy, this word has become a very tainted word, right? Right now, the so-called the only democracy in Middle East is openly conducted genocide. More and more people in China now see democracy when the United States talking about the democracy, freedom. People immediately thinking, okay, is there going to be another war, a regime change, or something that U.S. is going to do that is going to be very hurtful for the people? Unfortunately, that's what people see when the United States and the Western countries talking about, oh, you need democracy. We're going to bring democracy to you. That has become a code word for colonization. And David Sachs should know that. Right? If I were him, I wouldn't push all these kind of democracy talk in any of my articles if he wants any credibility with his article. Maybe that's not what he really wants. And the most outrageous part of his article is the conclusions. Here it says, this broad alignment is less surprising, the alignment with the West I just talked about, is less surprising than it seems. An important consensus has emerged in Taiwan on national security issues since Chinese President Xi Jinping's crackdown on democracy in Hong Kong, which again is not true. That's not democracy crackdown on Hong Kong. Leave to another day. And the Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Okay, next. Taiwanese, regardless of their political affiliation, do not want Taiwan to become the next Hong Kong or Taipei to become the next Kiev. To that end, they largely agree that the best way to protect their island is to invest in defense and to strengthen ties with the United States and other democracies. Now, that part is probably the most stunning part for this article, because he should know right now Ukraine is devastated. Ukraine's foreign policy has been lining up with the West, unconditionally following the United States and the NATO's order, pretty much. Right. Very famously, even after the war started in 2022 in April, there was a peace agreement, more or less agreed by both Ukraine and Russia. And then Boris Johnson went there and told Ukraine to continue to fight. That has been proven by multiple sources, right? And in other words, Ukrainians' policy to follow the West, to listen to what the United States asked them to do, and follow NATO has cost Ukraine for today's devastation. Hundreds of thousands of lives has lost. If Taiwan doesn't want to become the next Ukraine, Taiwan should really not continue this route to just rely everything on the United States, on the West. Taiwan really should start to seriously talking to the mainland, right? It's so obvious that how can David Sachs doesn't know this, doesn't see it, and believe somehow that to do exactly Ukraine has been doing, which is lining up with the West, will have a different outcome than Ukraine, right? Didn't Einstein told us if you do the same thing again and again, you will have the same result again and again, isn't it? So Ukraine has been lining up with the West unconditionally. And here we are, Ukraine has lost 400,000 people's lives. And David Sachs' conclusion for Taiwan to avoid that kind of fate is to do exactly what Ukraine has been doing, unconditionally follow the West. There are other places that he's just totally wrong and distortions, errors everywhere in this article. These are just the most egregious one. Now, despite that, why is it that his conclusion is more or less the same, which is after this election, the status quo will continue. 2024, what we expect from Taiwan will be the status quo. Okay, why is that? The reason Taiwan is going to be a status quo is because the United States right now doesn't have the energy, doesn't have the source, doesn't have anything to start a confrontation with China. Joe Biden and his administration are the ones who want a status quo. And if that's the case, Taiwan will to have the status quo. David Sachs knows that. He knows that. Deep down, he knows this is what the administration wants, then Taiwan will follow. Will follow the order. And that's why we are not going to see any major changes in the Taiwan Strait. It actually proves that Taiwan is simply doesn't have its own will. It is just the puppet of the United States. And China, mainland China knows that. China is fine with the status quo right now because China has its own schedule, has its own planning and thinking about this reunification, but it is in the Chinese constitution. So that's going to happen. The reunification is going to happen, but they have their own plan. It just turns out that both Beijing and the Washington thinking 2024 to keep the status quo works for both of them. That's the reason. But David Sachs spent this whole time, read this whole article, give you the impression, oh, people in Taiwan, regardless which party wins, they want status quo, and they also want to close to the West, and blah, blah, blah. It's not true, okay? Why does he say that? Well, because people like David Sachs, who seems like they against the Ukraine war, they're not really against the Ukraine war. They're against Ukraine losing the war. They have no problem having wars and instabilities and the conflicts around the world. They don't have problem with that. They just don't like to see their puppet losing the war. And actually, for people like David Sachs, they probably want to see some tensions and conflicts and maybe all-out war in the Taiwan Strait to divert the attention from Ukraine, because it's embarrassing. Now, like I said, the Biden administration simply doesn't have the energy. They are engulfed in the Ukraine war, the crisis in the Red Sea, and of course, the still ongoing bombing of the Gaza. All right. So they simply cannot start another front. That's the reason. That's not because the Biden administration doesn't want to have a war. They can't have a war with China at this point. One more thing I want to explain here. As you can see, Reuters just reported that Taiwan loses ally Nauru, accuses China of post-election ploy. It's a little bit confusing what this means. Okay, so Taiwan's official name is the Republic of China. Supposedly its capital is in Taipei and they're representing the whole China, mainland and Taiwan. So countries either have diplomatic relationship with mainland, which is People's Republic of China, or with the Republic of China, all right? Since 1949, the Communist Party of China took over the mainland. Vast majority of the countries in the world established diplomatic relationship with the People's Republic of China. When they do that, they cut ties with the Republic of China. But there are a few countries left. During Ma Ying-jeou's time, which is the time that both sides had a good relationship, actually there were about 20 plus countries that still had a diplomatic relationship with the Republic of China. But it has been going, this number has been going down gradually. The DPP took over, the pro-independence party took over Taiwan. To be clear, even these 20 plus countries, they had a diplomatic relationship with the Republic of China. They don't have diplomatic relationship with Taiwan. Taiwan is not a country. They have diplomatic relationship with Republic of China. To be more precisely, these countries always had a diplomatic relationship with the Republic of China. They just never cut the ties. Other countries cut their ties and then established diplomatic relationship with People's Republic of China. Okay, so that's how this is. Now, so far, and like I said, ever since the DPP took over Taiwan, the countries, one after another, cut their ties with Republic of China. There are still 12 countries remaining. I have the list here. As you can see, all of them are smaller countries, including Belize, Guatemala, Marshall Island, etc. Now, these countries keep their relationship with Republic of China is because Taiwan has been essentially bribing this country by giving them huge amount of aid and also the US pressure. Apparently, Nauru used to be one of them, but right now just cut ties with Taiwan. Taiwan, as you can see from the article, saying that's because of the mainland China's pressure, whatever. Whether Chinese government really put pressure on Nauru or the timing of the announcement, is that coincidence or is trying to make a statement? I really don't think it matters. One thing for sure here is that this list of countries is going to continue to shrink. In conclusion, 2024, Taiwan Strait will be more or less peaceful, unless something extraordinary happens, because both the United States and China want to have the status quo more or less. United States will keep on poking China's eye. Biden administration just sent a delegation to visit Taiwan right now as we speak. So Biden administration will continue to do these things to provoke China, but I don't think China is going to take actions militarily to take back Taiwan. Not at this point, even though more and more people in China is losing patience. But for various reasons, for now, at least, it doesn't seem to me that Xi Jinping and the Chinese government is planning to take military actions to reunify Taiwan. I'll be watching and keep you posted. If you like my program, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you.